So hello Devoxians, and thank you all for coming to this quickie. I'm Maciej.
And I'm Tomasz.
And today we will tell you about Knot.x, a reactive web integration platform. But before we start, quick hands up. How many of you heard about Vert.x? Okay, cool. And how many of you heard about reactive extensions such as RxJava, RxScala, RxJS? Wow, nice, excellent. We work at Cognified and we deliver digital solutions for such companies like Telegraph, Virgin Media or GSK. And today we'll show you different approaches for creating such big and complex platforms. We will start with a simple case and show you the challenges we encountered during design and development process.
Okay, so imagine that we need to create a website for one of the biggest investment services in UK. Most of the pages contains dynamic data coming from external services like Stock Exchange, Bank of England, and some agencies feeds. And all those pages are built with components, reusable components. So we've got search, we've got some graphs, we've got other data feeds, online chat, and so on. Moreover, this page will be managed by business guys, so we need to give them tools to manipulate the content. So finally, we will use some kind of content management system. When I describe this problem, probably you see a web page with a lot of web platform with a lot of integrations. But the problem can be defined much more generic. It can be any content, like PDF, HTML, or even Office document, which contains dynamic data and which is generated on demand. So let's see what assumptions we need to pass to create a good solution.
Yeah, let's point some key features of a platform. So first of all, we need to think about scalability, and the platform should be easy to extend. So this means it should adapt to the new requirements very quickly without affecting all parts of the system. It's also very important that the solution to integrate we choose is transparent for the whole system. This means two things. It should be stateless and highly efficient. And finally, it would be perfect if we can reuse this solution in the future projects.
Yes, so let's see what approaches we've got.
Yes, and let's start with the traditional backend approach. And in our example, we use a CMS to manage and provide pages. So since all the requests are already processed by the CMS, it seems like a natural candidate to combine the data from external sources. But also we'll face the problems with the performance very quickly in this architecture, and it's monolithic architecture, so scaling can be quite a challenge. So let's move to the client-side approach now.
Yes, so instead of backend processing, we can call all our services using front-end integration, so it's quite a natural decision. We use AJAX calls. It's quite simple to implement, but we need to define web API correctly to not affect our site user experience. But in most of our projects, we've got services which are not public, and we cannot use them, we cannot expose them via web API. So we still need a solution which combines those both approaches, front-end and back-end, but in a more smart way.
Yes, and let's call this smart way an integration layer. And the idea behind the integration layer is that it mediates between all parts of the system. And additionally, it handles all the traffic between the end users and the system itself.
Exactly. Being in this moment, last year, we decided to create a reusable solution. We open sourced it first and called Knot.x. And the main idea behind Knot.x is extremely simple. It combines dynamic data coming from external services in a manageable way. So coming back to our example, we use CMS to tell how our page will look like, and we shape our dynamic components, dynamic data into nice-looking components. So Knot.x fetches data from CMS. It's a static page. Then it collects all data from components and generates a final markup which contains both static and dynamic data.
Yes, and we built Knot.x on top of Vert.x, which is an event-driven non-blocking application framework. And we encountered many challenges typical for modern web platforms, for example, asynchronous processing. And for that, we use RxJava to handle multiple asynchronous events very smoothly. As you can see, there are many very interesting challenges, but we'll not cover all of them. Today we'll show you only a couple of them on demo in a moment, but if you are interested in them and want to find out more, they're all addressed in Knot.x and Vert.x documentation.
Okay, so before we will start our demo, we want to give you some details about Knot.x architecture to better understand what will happen in a few minutes. So our system is built with small isolated components. Those components define contracts. With those contracts, we can easily test our modules, upgrade, or even exchange. And those modules need to communicate, so they communicate using event bus. Event bus is lightweight messaging system coming directly from Vert.x. It works using TCP. So now we can exchange messages between all components without any problem. And there is one thing which totally changed the game. Event bus is distributed. It means that we can start our Knot.x instance in cluster mode, and from now, all our modules can communicate with each other, even if they are on different hosts. So that's a very useful solution for scaling. Additionally, we can deploy the same module on one or more hosts, and we will get load balancing from Vert.x for free.
And all those things Tomasz said are done without any changes in the code.
Yeah, exactly.
And we did some performance tests just to check how fast this construction is, and we found out that it's really, really fast. Yeah. So these performance tests were performed just on one instance of Knot.x without any scaling. And for example, a page with one external source integration will be ready for us in 5 milliseconds with the load of 200 requests per second. But now let's back to our case, where we design a platform for investment service in UK.
Okay, so now we will show you the page which combines data from external sources. It's processed, of course, by Knot.x. And from the left, we've got graph, which represents front-end integration. So we deployed our gateway, a microservice, directly inside Knot.x instance. Then we'll show you example of backend integration. We've got secured service, so we cannot expose it. And finally, we've got a source, which is not REST. So we've got database. We've got no web API for it. So we need to connect to this database directly from our Knot.x instance.
Right.
So maybe let's start our demo. And let's switch.
I will just
engines.
Switch to the...
Yeah, exactly. So Knot.x is simple jar file. It contains all dependencies. It's a fat jar, and when we started, we need to provide JSON configuration when we've got a data source definition. So now let's start it. We started in cluster mode now. So you will see that when Knot.x started, we had information about members. We've got now one member in our cluster. Now let's see the bottom of this log, and we've got modules which are deployed. So we've got several different modules which are deployed, and they communicate via event bus.
Right.
So let's see our page.
Okay, this is the one.
Okay, so this page will start with this left component. And you can see that this component loads in a few seconds. So we call, using Ajax, our microservice. And this microservice is deployed directly within our Knot.x instance. So it works on the same domain and on the same port. What are benefits with that solution? We are easily able to scale our microservices. And we've got one cluster to manage both front-end, back-end integration, and microservices.
Exactly. So maybe let's move to the backend side. So the component on the right that lists some prices is integrated via backend because it's not available publicly. So let's open this service. As you can see, it's worked on a different port and contains some JSON data. And it's secured, so we cannot expose it and integrate with via public API. So to integrate with this service, we need to show Knot.x this simple snippet, which contains some HTML markup with placeholders. And also it tells Knot.x that the data will come from commodity service. As you can see, there is no address of the commodity service. We define this address in the Knot.x configuration, and we tell that it will be available on the event bus under this address. And also we pass the path to the service, and this is exactly the path we use to, this is this one, to fetch the data.
Yes, so exactly. So you can think about this definition like a data source, and we do not care about from where we will get this data. We've got only the address and contract.
Exactly. And what Knot.x does, it takes this template, this snippet, it fetches the data asynchronously and fills the placeholders with the data to serve the final markup. So maybe let's move now to the last example, the database.
So let's start with a situation where we've got no web API, we've got no REST service to connect. So we need to connect with some data source directly from our Knot.x instance, from our integration layer. Yeah. So now Maciej will start, we develop very small module which connects to database. We'll show it in a minute. Now Maciej start our module in Vert.x instance, but it's a second Vert.x instance, and it contains only one module, which is responsible for connecting with database. Now you can see that we've got two members in our cluster. So when we will refresh the page, you will see that nothing will happen, because we defined our module, we defined our endpoint, we've got data source, but we need to modify our content to tell that we want to use this data source. So we need simply add some snippet to our HTML.
So this is the snippet.
So let's copy the snippet.
Let's use it.
It's written in the same way. So we define only data source, and in configuration we've got information that this data source comes directly from database. So now when we paste this snippet in HTML, we can refresh our page, and you will see that we are able to display our transactions. So they are ready, and they are ready to use, so ready to display. And in that way, we are able to create very performant, scalable solution. We can deploy those modules on different hosts, and they are working in cluster thanks to Hazelcast Cluster Manager, but you can use other plugins.
And what's worth remember that this way of using from the external sources, the data source is very consistent. So we doesn't care about the source exactly at the level of the markup. We just define where the data will be available at on the event bus, and we use them simply in the components.
Exactly.
Okay, so maybe we can show you quickly this database connection. It's in examples.
Okay, so we provide some archetype to generate some extension points to Knot.x, so you will not have to worry about that. It's very simple. We prepared this simple implementation, and you've got proxy object where we connect to database, and we fetch data from it. So it's very simple, simple code using RxJava.
Exactly. So fetching the data is as simple as getting a client and reactive connection and making some transformation from the SQL connection to the results.
Yeah, maybe let's see some configuration file, and we'll show you how it's configured.
Right. So I have the main part outlined here. So again, we tell that we will use a transactions data source. It will be available at this address, and what we simply pass a query to the database. And this query will be later processed in this DB adapter proxy. As you can see, we fetch the query here, and we just use it.
Yeah, and of course, this module we present with database, it's only for sample purposes. All modules which are released with Knot.x, they are released as a core platform. So you've got support for templates, we've got support for forms. So you are able to very simply implement your forms in very manageable way. Those can be even multi-step forms. So all this business logic will be implemented by you in your modules. So you know what your business is. but we will give you tools which allow you to do it quickly, easily, and very easy to scale.
And basically, that's all from our side. We will make the demo we showed you, the script, available on the GitHub in a few minutes. Also, we'll share the presentation. Here are some useful links, and thank you for the attention.